Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're taking a look at Zotac's RTX 3060 Ti OC Twin Fan Edition. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so today on the video we'll be taking a look at Zotac's Geforce RTX 3060 Ti Twin Fan OC Edition. Now this is a slight step up from the standard Twin Fan Edition. This gives you roughly around about 50 MHz out of the box extra speed on those boost clocks. Now the boost clocks on this one are 1695 MHz as standard, as what is stated. But as we found out in testing, it boosts way over that. So you're looking at least realistically around about 2000 MHz, if not more. Some of these models have been seen up to 2100 MHz, so obviously your mileage will vary depending on different parameters such as your power, your cooling, all those kinds of things. As is usual with these nvidia cards these days, they will take advantage of those kinds of situations. So good power supply, good cooling, and you should see this do particularly well. Now we could really round this review up straight away by just saying, well, basically it's about the same as a 2080 Super and considerably cheaper. That's the end of the review. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. But we're not going to do it quite as easily as that. We're going to look at some of the specs, we'll go through the unboxing process, give you some of the pros and cons, and obviously we do have to take into account the time that we are currently living in. Now this is the early March 2021 at the moment, so yeah, if you're watching this in hindsight, you can probably imagine what things were like. At the moment, GPUs are like hen's teeth. They're very expensive, way over recommended retail prices. That is if you can actually get one. So we're taking a lot of things for granted here, one of which being you can actually buy one. Secondly, they're in stock. And thirdly, well, yeah, it is luck of the draw if you can actually get one or not. So comparatively, this is a really difficult thing to actually put anything against it. Realistically, yes, you can say quite happily RTX 2080 Super, RTX 2080. If you've got one of those, absolutely no point of getting one of these. But if you've got one of those slightly older models, maybe like a GTX 1060, or perhaps something a little bit less than that, then certainly this is definitely worth looking at. If you're with a graphics card such as an RTX 2060 Super, or maybe an RX 5700 XT, then realistically, getting as much money together as you possibly can and really struggling to get one of these in today's market potentially isn't really worth it. Which is a shame to say, but that is definitely a sign of the times. Now I should say first of all, this particular card does not belong to me. It has been sent kindly by the people at Zotac for me to take a look at, and they haven't asked me to say anything or to test anything specific or to mention anything whatsoever. So I'm going to say things exactly as I see them at the current time of the market. Very shortly after this review, this will be in box back up and go on to the next reviewer to see what they think of it. So yeah, don't think of me as being one of those lucky few that actually managed to bag one of these. Now, if you were to manage to bag one of these at their recommended retail prices on the market, you should be looking at paying in and around the £400 mark. Now, obviously the dollar to pound variation comes into effect also, but this is designed originally to compete around the Founders Edition card, so you should be paying around about that magical $399. But yeah, as we know, things have changed drastically, but essentially, in a perfect world, this should be costing you around about £400. And what do you get for your £400? Well, you get 4,864 CUDA cores. We're not going to count them. You also, like I said before, you get a 1695 boost clock speed, which is kind of irrelevant because it boosts much higher than that. You also get 8 GB of GDDR6 VRAM, courtesy of Samsung, and also you get a 14 gigabits per second memory bandwidth. That is also supported on a 256 memory bus, which is a little bit better than we've seen on some of the other cards, which are in and around the same kind of level, such as the 3060, which has only got a 192-bit memory bus, which will affect certain things, especially at higher resolutions. This card is effectively, like I said, pretty much a RTX 2080 Super equivalent, or thereabouts. In some titles it does a little bit better due to those enhanced RTX cores, which have been improved for the 3000 series range. But realistically, for rasterization processes, essentially you should find very similar results. So if you had your mindset on an RTX 2080 Super and that was the card you had your sight set on, but Obviously, way too expensive and totally not available. If you should find one of these, a 3060 Ti available on the marketplace for a sensible price, then I thoroughly recommend you buy one. Some of the reasons why I would recommend buying it, purely down to Zotac, they do generally tend to put out some, what I would consider, not so much budget options, but really cost-effective options. You can spend considerably more, 100, 150, even up to £200 more on custom versions of the RTX 3060 Ti, which in my opinion doesn't really give you a great deal. Yes, possibly it's going to be a little bit cooler, and it's going to be possibly a little bit quieter, and potentially have an absolute whole load of bling attached to it. But is that really necessary for modern gaming? Now for 1440p and 1080p gaming, this thing really does kick some ass. When you get up to 4K, then obviously things do start to struggle a little bit. Now, this card will support 4K quite easily, and actually will support up to 8K resolutions, which is pretty surprising considering its initial price point. This time possibly, maybe a year or so ago, looking at running an 8K monitor, you'd be looking at spending thousands of pounds on a graphics card, which just goes to show how far we've come with these nvidia cores these days. So that's enough blathering on. Let's take a look at the box, see what we actually get, and take a look at the card itself. So first of all, packaging wise, yeah, pretty much what we expect to see these days from Zotac. Actually really nice looking packaging, and I was actually surprised how small the packaging was. This actually does appear to be quite a small card, which we'll take a look at later. And again, due to the way that nvidia have actually optimized the PCBs and the cores, the layouts, etc, etc, and also obviously the manufacturing process being shrunken down, is meaning that PCBs are getting smaller and smaller, and in theory that should result in smaller and smaller cards. It certainly seems to in this particular case. This actual card compares very, very easily to the card in the PC behind me, which is the RTX 2060 Super, the Twin OC Mini Edition from Zotac also, and actually that card is marginally larger. Even though this is a considerable step up, and again, RTX 2080 Super kind of specs, you would expect it to be an absolutely huge card, but it certainly isn't. Looking at the packaging again, so extended warranty, you've got 8GB of GDDR RAM, you've also got the Ice Storm Technology 2.0 with their new cooling solution. It's a Geforce RTX 3060 Ti, as we said before, and it supports things such as nvidia's Ampere architecture. It also has ray tracing support and the oh so popular DLSS, which is becoming more and more popular as the days go by. Again, if you're looking at buying one of these on the market and it's a choice between the Twin Edge or the Twin Edge OC, realistically there's not a huge deal between them. They do both perform very similar, and that does seem to be the case with pretty much all of the RTX 2060 Ti's on the market right now. They all do perform within very small percentiles of each other. Looking on the back of the box goes into some more features. So we've got Ice Storm 2.0, which is their advanced GPU cooling solution, and also you've got Firestorms, which is basically Zotac's own implementation of a kind of overclocking suite. So you can tune and tweak fans, etc., overclock speeds, all that kind of stuff. For me personally, actually using this and doing some testing today, using the built-in NVIDIA benchmark and also the NVIDIA kind of testing tool, which takes absolutely forever to do its thing, actually worked really well and did bump up the core speeds and the memory speeds quite considerably. So a quick drill down of the features actually stated on the box. So we've got the 2nd generation ray tracing support. We've also got the 3rd gen tensor cores, PCI Express generation 4, which in some instances actually does benefit. Also support for Microsoft DirectX 12 Ultimate Edition, and also you've got things like DLSS, as we said before. GeForce Experience, which is actually quite a handy little app. It is a little bit intrusive, and I would love it if the GeForce Experience would just work without you having to log in and all that kind of usual stuff, or sign in with Google, sign in with whatever, but that is down to NVIDIA, not down to Zotac. Obviously, you don't need to install that if you don't want to. You can just plod along quite happily using Firestorm. So we've got support for NVIDIA G-Sync, we've got NVIDIA GPU Boost, Game Ready drivers, Vulkan RT API, OpenGL 4.6, DisplayPort 1.4a and HDMI 2.1, HDCP 2.3, and it's VR ready. Is VR still a thing? So that's enough of the specs. Let's take this thing out and take a good look at it. So the packaging, again, on the inside, pretty much the standard deal. Zotac don't go particularly overboard on their packaging, which I prefer, because I'd rather see the money put into the product than I would into the packaging, which is either going to be displayed on a shelf if you're a YouTuber, or stuck in a cupboard if you're a normal person. In the box you get the holographic instruction manual, and also there's a couple of stickers in there. I won't bother going into those because most of you aren't really bothered about that. What you are bothered about is the graphics card itself. One thing I did notice is this little empty section here, which is a reusable bit from another particular model using the same size, where you sometimes get a power adapter for your power supply. Now the power supply for this, they do recommend you have a 650 watt power supply. I've been using it with a 500 watt one and it's been absolutely fine, and all you need is a single 8-pin PCI Express connection. And here is the card itself, and I think this card actually does look fantastic. It's a very minimalist design, as is quite often the way with Zotac, especially in their more budget-orientated offerings. It does feel very weird to say budget when you talk about a GPU at any point in time, especially now, March 2021. Things are slightly ludicrous, and if you can actually find one of these, it probably won't be at a budget price. But certainly, this is the kind of mid-tier of graphics cards at the moment, so if you are looking at picking one up and you don't want all those frills, then this is definitely worth looking at. You do have a pair of 90mm fans on there, which are their new 11 blade models, which have got a really good scoop to them, giving you lots of static pressure to push the air through that heatsink structure, so keeping everything nice and cool. One thing that some people have noticed is if you look on the side, you possibly won't be able to pick it up, but the fans do seem to be slightly exposed in some areas. Now some people have actually reported a noise of kind of like fan blade chopping, as you do get with things like some desk fans, etc. if there's wind blowing at a strange angle towards it. Those of you that have fans in the front of your PC, you'll notice this more, especially if they're high static pressure and blowing a lot of air towards the graphics card. They do seem to pick up on that. Don't know whether it's the angle of the fans or whether it's because of some of the way that some systems are set up, but certainly some people have reported that. I personally haven't. In my system, the fans are actually blowing up from underneath, and I have noticed no odd noises whatsoever. One thing you will notice with this card is because the fans are a little bit smaller and there are just the two of them, certainly when temperatures do get right up, when overclocking, this can get quite noisy, which is quite noticeable. Although in general use, they do have fan stop technology, so the fans will basically stop spinning altogether. And actually in idle conditions, I found this card around about 30 degrees at the normal core and the hotspot being around 40, 42. So that is a particularly good show. Even under kind of regular loads such as Windows, YouTube Play and that kind of stuff, a few Chrome tabs, etc. Anywhere between 40 and 50 degrees is what you'd commonly see. The fans themselves don't really kick into overdrive until you hit around about 60 degrees, which is absolutely normal. The fans themselves, I did find there's a kind of almost like a weird satin sheen to them. Some people may like it. I think it's probably going to be easier for cleaning if you're one of those people that have got a relatively dusty house, or you've got pets, DIY work going on or whatever. Then fan blades do pick up dust, and I think with that shiny coating on there, they are going to be a little bit easier to look after in the long term. Taking this thing apart is actually extremely simple. On the back of the card, there are 6 screws. Take those out and you can basically take the whole thing apart, which we did a little bit earlier, just to see the actual structure of the card inside. Looking just underneath where we've got the fans there, you can see the heat pipe setup. So you've got 4 heat pipes in there, which kind of wrap around all the heat sensitive areas, and actually seem to do a very, very good job of keeping things nice and cool and nice and quiet, despite the car's diminutive size. Again, considering this has got the horsepower of basically a RTX 2080 Super, this is a fantastic engineering feat, it really is. Moving around to the rear I/O on the back, so we've got the HDMI port, which is HDMI 2.1. Also then you've got 3 display ports. The display ports are DisplayPort 1.4a, so theoretically you could get this up to a whopping 60 Hz in 8K with HDR enabled, or what I think most people probably end up doing is probably around about the 144 Hz in 4K with, again, HDR enabled, which is a pretty crazy resolution. Now realistically in 4K, hitting 144 frames per second is going to be pushing this card in particular. Again, depending on the games you're playing, I think most people who are buying or perhaps looking at a card like this, you're going to be playing 1080p high refresh, or you're going to be looking at 1440p, which I think is probably the bulk of people looking at a card like this. Size wise, actually, again, it is a very small card. You're looking at 222mm in length. You're looking at around about 115mm of width, which actually doesn't really protrude much further out than the actual PCI Express bracket. And you're looking at around about 38mm high, so definitely a 2-slot card, although you will need an additional slot or 2 underneath it to actually allow air to get into those fans. Moving on to the side of the card, this is where things, I would say get interesting, but it's not particularly interesting, but we'll take a look anyway. We've got the Zotac gaming logo there, which actually does light up. It isn't RGB, sadly, it is only illuminated in white. You can actually turn that off as well if you want to, either by 2 means, either in the software itself, or you can actually just disconnect the cable. So if you don't want any RGB or any lighting on your card at all, then you can quite simply disconnect that. Again, take the 2 screws out, unfold the card, and you can remove it quite easily. Also with the fans, if you're taking it away for cleaning, that kind of thing, just 2 connectors. They're very easily definable. One's a white connector, one's a black connector. Yeah, very straightforward thing to do. You've also got the Geforce RTX markings on the side there, which we're used to seeing. And we've got the 8-pin PCI Express power cable. Now this card realistically is rated at 200 watts, although under full load we have seen it taking up to 244 watts. So obviously do bear that in mind. One thing I am finding more and more so with modern cards now, especially the shorter ones with the smaller PCBs, is actually how much space is wasted by the cooling setup. Even though this is a very diminutive card, as you can see, the actual PCB ends here, where the PCI Express port is. So essentially it is that is your graphics card. The rest of the overhang is cooling. So yeah, it is potentially, there could be a mini version of this as well, which will be even smaller. Whether or not they'll do a single fan version, we're waiting to see. I would have thought probably not. Looking at the back plate, so you've got a nice metal back plate which attaches to some of the heat sensitive areas to dissipate some of the heat with pads, etc. Also there's a little bit of ventilation over here to allow some of that heat to actually escape rather than being trapped underneath. It's got a slightly wraparound section here which protects the fins on the very end. And actually some of the angles of this, when I was filming the B-roll, I was looking at it, I do think it is actually a particularly nice looking card, despite the fact there aren't a great deal of bells and whistles such as RGB lighting or maybe a triple fan or anything. It's kind of very elegant in the way it works and the way it's been designed. Certainly little design elements like the slots which are cut out of here, which are kind of reminiscent of the actual Zotac logo. Got a few more of them here and also on the side as well. Again, just to let some of the air out, but it's rather than just being grills or old-fashioned just slots, they've actually put a little bit of design ethic into it. So I think if you've got an open PC where people could see it on your desktop, it's going to look really nice despite it not having a ton of RGB. So realistically, with this card being as small as it is, you shouldn't have any issues whatsoever fitting it in pretty much any system. When the card is actually installed in the PC, as you'll see from some of the B-roll, the actual end of the card doesn't even pass the side of a normal ATX motherboard. So if you are in a slightly more constricted case, there isn't going to be any problems at all. With the cooling being as good as it is, again, cooling isn't going to be a problem with this. You can overclock it and really get those temperatures up. As standard, it does hit around about the 70 to 71 degrees mark under full load, although you can actually adjust it so it will take up to about 83 degrees before it starts getting extremely toasty round about its thermal limitations. Taking the card apart, you can see Samsung's GDDR6 memory intact all around, and that is nicely cooled with the cooling situation with thermal pads. That seems to be all done very, very well indeed. Also, you can see the actual processor in the middle. So that is the GA104-200, which is effectively the same that is used in the RTX 3070, albeit this is a slightly cut down version with lesser CUDA cores. So that's it for a tour of the card. How does it actually perform? Now, I've only tested it in a limited amount of games because at the moment, again, what is going on in the world, pricing, etc., the chances of you actually being able to buy one of these at the current time, it is a little bit disheartening, and it really does put you off actually doing too much testing and getting people excited for a card, which for this, at the right price and being available, you should be getting excited. It is a fantastic little card, and it does perform exceptionally well. Even in things such as Cyberpunk 2077 with all the eye candy turned on at 1080p, it still is very, very playable, as you'd expect, because essentially it's a RTX 2080 Super, kind of in disguise. Other games such as Counter-Strike and also games like Rocket League also play fantastically. So if esports are your thing, you're going to get exceptionally high frame rates, even with all the textures and all the goodies turned on. So it'll look absolutely fantastic, but still be hitting well in excess of 200 frames per second in pretty much most titles. One of the things that I haven't tested in this is actually 4K gaming. Personally, I don't actually own any 4K monitors, so obviously that is a very difficult thing for me to do. But I don't think really 4K is where this is going to shine, although obviously you can use it in 4K or even 8K if you're some kind of sadist. But for those of you 1080p gaming, 1440p gaming, this card does give you a considerable bang for your buck, although obviously at the MSRP or thereabouts. So I think that's pretty much going to wrap this one up. I would have loved to show you more stuff on it, but again, it's one of those things that there's been so many benchmarks of the RTX 2080 Super and all the other cards in that kind of similar performance range Really, if you've got a specific game and you want to see how it does, then basically do a search on YouTube like everybody else does. But for me personally, if you're looking for advice, you've seen the benchmarks on other sites and you're thinking, should I actually buy it? Well, you guys know me. I actually really love Zotac's products. Despite the fact they send them to me free of charge for review purposes, I still have to send them back, so there's no real need for me to say anything particularly positive, and certainly if there's anything negative, I would certainly highlight it. And obviously one of the negative things about this is some of the fan noise at those higher temperatures. It is certainly going to be louder than a triple fan solution, but the benefit is you don't get the extra price which you normally would associate with a triple fan setup. So overall, would I recommend this card at its normal retail price? Yes, most definitely. Would I recommend it at those inflated sculpting prices? Nope, not a chance in hell. So it's going to be down to you to work out when it's available, if the price is right for you. If it is right, get one. So that's going to wrap this one up. I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the non-sculpt world. Thanks for watching.